are here with Teacher Tom today, and I am so excited to talk to him because he is fast becoming one of my absolute heroes, somebody who validates everybody out there in this space that believes that children have their own voices and that they have the ability to direct their own education, and they become amazing, excellent, creative, innovative people as they grow, just like we all do, because this is a natural way we learn, right, Tom?
Sure is. Hi, Chauncy. Thanks for inviting me to talk with you. This is it is the, I mean, it's, if you look at human history, right? I mean, we didn't have schools until really the last, 150 years or so. And kids learned everything they needed to learn. And don't try to tell me that like hunter-gatherer societies were less complex than ours, because I mean, they had to know how to like get their own food, right. Things like that. We just go shopping. They had to actually like know what they could eat and what they were, they didn't have FDAs telling them what was safe and everything. So there was a great deal that you had to learn then. And so it's the way we've evolved to learn, is by following our own interests, by looking around at the world and saying, boy, I need to know about that, and then pursuing that, which is what we call it play in early years, which is my specialty, preschool years. But you call it interest?
Interest-based learning. Yeah.
Interest-based learning. Some people call it self-directed learning, which I think,
right.
That's another phrase. It's all kind of the same thing, though. And it's what, homeschoolers are doing, what unschoolers are doing, and what schools like mine, play-based schools, have been doing for quite some time, quite successfully.
Right. Yes. And I so agree with you that you read any literature, about even like Little House on the Prairie, which was not that long ago or whatever. Yeah. And you see what people had to know.
Yeah.
Much more complex than what we have today.
What we're driven to do, I mean, what I really see children doing is they will look out in the world, right? And we as adults, we don't need to know what they're going to learn, because they already know what they need to learn, right? They're going to look around and say, well, there's some other kids here. I got to learn how to like get involved with them somehow. Or they're going to look around and they're going to say, oh man, look at this. Look out there in the world. There's all these superheroes out there. I guess I'm going to have to learn how to do that stuff. And so they play those kind of games, and they, and that's serious business, right? Because we think, oh, that's just superheroes. Well, that's just, that's kind of code for our ideas around masculinity, right? Mm-hmm. And so a lot of the little boys and little girls, they start going, okay, we got to protect people. We got to be tough. Or contrary, every little girl I've ever known goes through a princess phase. Right. And what is that about? It's about feminine beauty, right? And I might not think it's important. You might not think it's important. None of the people listening, but the kids know it is, right? Because they look around at their culture and they say, oh, I need to deal with this. And so what they do through their play is they go and they put on those costumes to find out, okay, what's this all about? What does it mean to have this kind of beauty? What does, to wear a crown, to wear jewels, to wear a fancy dress, to do all that kind of stuff. And, and then they process that. That's how they process everything. So when you watch children playing, that's pretty much what they're doing. They do have their eye on the future. It might just be 2 minutes in the future, but they do have their eye on the future.
But that's okay. And that brings up so much. You said the word meaning. You said the word meaning. And I don't have a degree in anything. I'm not college educated, and I don't have a degree in psychology, least of all. But I was just writing a blog on Maslow and how, the hierarchy of needs and everything. Yeah. And I'm just saying, I just feel like Maslow got it wrong. I think the basic need everybody has is for meaning in their life. If you don't have meaning, you don't care if you eat. If you don't have meaning, you don't care about shelter. Everybody has to find their meaning, and the way that they find meaning is, as a child, is through play, is through exploring their interests. That's how they find meaning in the world around them.
If you want to drill it down a little farther, what they're doing is looking for connection. Mm-hmm. Right? That's what all of us are doing. That's all any of us are doing. I think that's kind of what you're saying by meaning too, is that once you've created connection, and you might be connecting with a loose part on the ground, you might be connecting with the grass in your lawn, you might be connecting. And believe me, when you read indigenous literature and things like that, things written by indigenous people, they talk about how the plants are always reaching out to us to connect with us. The animals are always reaching out to connect with us. And so, your children are born. They're born right away. The first thing they start doing is making the suckling thing. They need to connect. That's a real connection, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that's, to me, when I think about that, I think that's, that's number one, connection. Because we all know, we've seen those, those sad accidental experiments, babies that are ignored roll over and die, right? Without that connection.
Yeah. So true. So Yeah. So tell me a little bit more. I got really excited, and the reason I reached out to you is because of your course.
Mhm.
And by the end of this, I'm going to encourage you to post your course on our platform when we have it up in a few
Okay.
months, because I am so passionate as you are about getting this information out to as many people as we can and helping people to make that connection and find that meaning in education beyond the conveyor belt, beyond the indoctrination, beyond all that. So tell me more about your course.
Okay, so I have a new course. This is my third course, I think, now that I've got out there. And this one it's called Teacher Tom's Play-Based Learning. And I don't call it play-based education. I call it learning because that's really what it's all about.
But it is.
Education is a real, education can mean a lot of stuff. To me, learning is about thinking. So anyway, this is something that I've put together because I've been doing, I've been a preschool teacher, play-based preschool teacher for the last 2 decades in a cooperative school. So this is, and I don't know, maybe your listeners don't know what a cooperative is. A cooperative is a school where the parents actually attend school with their kids. Mm-hmm. And so it's a great marriage. There's a lot of people who called themselves homeschoolers who came to my school, right? A lot of unschoolers who came to our school because it's a great way to build community. And that's what it was all about, was building this community. And for me, I started writing a blog in 2009, and the whole idea was just to keep the families kind of connected with each other, because I didn't understand in 2009 that, I knew it intellectually, but I didn't quite understand the whole world might read this. Before long, I had hundreds of thousands of readers, and it was sort of overwhelming to me. But people kept saying, "Oh, I want to teach like you, Teacher Tom. I want to do what you do. Those kids are so lucky." And I didn't even know that I had a philosophy. I didn't know that I had anything. I was just doing what came naturally, following the children's interests, letting the children ask and answer their own questions rather than me drilling them on all kinds of things. I'm a little bit like you. Mm-hmm. I don't have my degrees in journalism. My degree isn't in education. I came to education through my own daughter, because we enrolled in a cooperative school when she was little. And that's where I just really found out, hey, these are the geniuses, right? These are the people, and it's true. I'm not joking about that. NASA, I don't know if you've heard about this, but this was a few years back. They have this test that they give to their new employees. And it's testing to see, they're trying to identify creative geniuses, right? So they could take advantage of these creative geniuses, the Einstein types. And when they give the test to adults, about 2% of adults test as creative geniuses. They tested 5-year-olds. This was, I think, 2 or 3 years ago. They tested 5-year-olds, and 98% of the 5-year-olds tested as creative geniuses.
I think I vaguely remember something about this now that you mention it. Yeah.
And what's so amazing to me about that is there's something we do to children between 5 years old and adulthood that makes them not be creative geniuses anymore. The thing we most uniformly do to children is send them to school.
Yeah.
Right? That kind of traditional idea of school and everything. So really what my school is about is taking advantage of that creative genius and not trying to squash it, but actually understanding that these children, through pursuing their own interests, are going to learn everything they need to learn for their age and stage. Mm-hmm. They are going to learn exactly what they need to do. They're not going to learn the list of tick boxes that, school districts tend to come up with, which, may or may not have to do with the child's life. I mean, we've all heard that, right? I mean, every middle schooler has come home from school to say everything is irrelevant, right? That's when they learn that word irrelevant.
Isn't it true? I mean,
and it's true, right? Because
isn't that true?
Because, up until about that age, they're sort of like, well, I'm just going to go along with this. I guess this is what I'm going to do. And then they start questioning and they start saying, but it's true all the way down to preschool. So anyway, what my course is designed to do is to support homeschooling parents, unschooling parents, to support educators who want to take advantage of the play-based education, people who already have play-based curricula that they want to enhance and improve. And really the idea, and so kind of in the spirit of self-directed learning, this is not going to be 6 weeks of me telling you what to do and what to think. This really is what it's designed to do, is to get people thinking, is to get you thinking about your own practices, your own ideas, your own background, your own life, your own community. I think that's one piece we forget about a lot, is the communities we're in completely should shape. I mean, I say even neighborhood to neighborhood.
Yes, absolutely.
Place to place, it needs to change based on the kids. My great example is my school is in just north of downtown Seattle. And we have, within walking distance of the school, 35 breweries.
Wow.
And some of our families work in those breweries. Some of our families even own those breweries. Guess where we take even 2 and 3-year-olds on field trips?
Mommy and daddy's workplace.
we take them and we go to a brewery. And people would say, oh, I could never do that where I am. Well, that's probably true, because that would be random for some place where there's not a brewery nearby.
Right.
But for us, this is part of our community. It's what our community values. It's a part of our economy. And it is fascinating because it's a factory, right? So children go and we spend time there just, eating grains, right? Or, what I'll never forget too, going there, and this one little girl on the bus on the way there, she said to me, there's a little Audrey, she was so pointed. She's 5 years old by now. I've been teaching her for 3 years, and she knew this was weird. And she said to me on the bus, she said, why are we going to go to learn about beer? I don't care about beer. I don't like beer. None of us like beer. She was like starting a rebellion on the bus. None of us like beer. And so that's part of what it should be about. Questioning authority. If you're not able to question authority, then it's not really a play-based. It's not self-learning.
Right.
It's not self-driven. And as the adults, as the authority figures, we sure better not be saying things that we can't defend. We sure should be allowing space for children to question our authority and what we're doing. So here she was, a rebellion as I had 20 kids going on a bus, to go see this place. And I said, Audrey, listen, I promise. If you don't like it, there's a playground a block away. We'll just walk over to the playground. I know you'll like it down there. So I said that to her. I said, I bet it's a factory. You'll have fun. So we got in there. Sure enough, the owner of this brewery had a 5-year-old, and she really knew how to talk to kids. And so she had him in there, and she was showing them how the machines worked. And she had set out different kinds of grains for them to sample, and they hated all of them. And eating, tasting icky stuff is really fun. Tasting these things, and then at one point, this little girl Audrey, she found some empty kegs, and she them right. They're really light. She could lift it up. She started carrying it around. Then suddenly, all the kids are carrying around these kegs, and I took a lot of pictures of that. I said to them, "I'm getting them college ready."
Yeah, there you go.
That is, of course, a joke. But so this is the kind of thing, but that's what I say is that so anyway, my idea for this course is that everybody, the people who take part in it, I want people to spend time just thinking, because to me, there is no distinction between thinking and learning. Thinking is the learning. And so often we think about, we live in this culture where right and wrong answers. We look up to right and wrong answers somehow. I don't care about whether their answers are right and wrong. What I care is that they are thinking about things. They're spending time thinking and using their brain on things and coming up with answers that suit them for a time. And someday it'll come up for them to reinvestigate that answer.
Yeah.
So, maybe I'm wrong there. And that way
this is dead on.
Yeah. So
this is dead on, because when we were talking a few minutes ago, I grew up way out in the country. I had my next sibling was 7 years older. He was off, doing his own thing long before I was, even toddling around. And I had no friends. I was way out in the country. And all I had was a little pony and a bike and a little dog. And I just spent hours thinking and playing. And I learned to play the piano at 6, and I learned to read. I don't remember when I couldn't read because we didn't have screens.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, a lot of my message to families, and I'm trying to bring in families who are, because I recognize that a ton of people are going, I can't have my kid in the public school anymore. Oh my gosh. I can't, my eyes have been opened. I can't have them in there. What am I going to do? Yeah. And they're finding that their family culture is not ready for home education. So I'm trying to bring people into, let's fix the family culture first. Okay, let's turn off the screens. Let's start you learning how to enjoy learning again and then you model that for your kids. You start feeling like a kid again. You start reawakening your creativity, your innovation. You find your voice. You find your intellect again. And guess what? Your kids are going to follow you. They're also, I mean, you never went through that phase because you got to stay in childhood in a way. right? And I have that too, because I never gave up pursuing everything and anything that I like to do. That's just part of my nature. And that's how I raised my kids.
Mhm.
But when I started looking around and talking more to people, and you're getting the usual, you always get the same answers. Well, what about socialization?
Yeah.
Well, what am I going to do with my kids for 24 hours a day, 360, what, 18, what, what am I going to do?
Yeah.
How am I going to prepare them for I'm not smart enough. You always hear, I'm not smart enough.
That's
And,
fascinating.
and so those are the questions I'm addressing.
Yeah.
It's like, well, start with just making a list of stuff you like to do.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to turn off the screens. Like, you get committed to no screens for 6 months. Commit yourself to turning off the television and putting your phones away.
And, and I completely, that role modeling, you're absolutely spot on about that, because that's what children are doing. That's the study they make of the world, is they're watching the world around them, including the adults, including the other children, including the animals and the plants in their life. And they're taking their cues from those kinds of things. What they don't take very good cues from is people who boss them around, from people who are telling them what to do. And that's really the greatest weakness. There's quite a bit of research on this. Something like 80% of the sentences adults say to children are commands.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody likes to be told what to do, no matter how
Right.
old you are. I mean,
Right.
my great example is if you're sitting home alone and okay, you're not watching TV, so you're reading a book, right? And you're reading a book and you're eating crackers or cookies, you got crumbs all over you, and you've made a mess, it's on the floor, and you think to yourself, I'm going to go get out the vacuum and clean that up, when I get to the end of this chapter.
Mm-hmm.
So you're totally on board with, that's my responsibility. I'm going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And then your husband walks in and says, vacuum the rug.
Like, no.
That's fighting words, right? because he phrased it as a command. Even if he says, vacuum the rug, please. Those are still fighting words. I've never known anybody who would just comply. And if I did know somebody like that, I feel like they're broken.
Right.
And so that's exactly why it's a miracle our kids ever do anything we want them to do, because we command them so much.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is the kind of thing that, for me, that's really kind of the core of what I'm trying to get people to understand, is to treat children like human beings.
Mm-hmm.
It's a radical idea, I know.
That is radical. Mm-hmm. What we're talking about is radical. It really is. It is in an age where safety is like king. And I want to talk about the safety thing too, because safety is way overblown. Self-esteem comes from people developing themselves. It doesn't come from outside influences, right?
Actually, self-esteem usually comes from actually succeeding at things. It comes from actually doing
succeeding.
Things.
That's what I mean. But you have to feel stuff. Yeah. You have to feel within yourself that you're succeeding. Right. It can't be people trying to convince you that you're succiding. Right. It has to come from that feeling of success.
And like you said about the safety piece. I mean, it is we live. The media for one is a big part of this, right? Because I don't think the world. I mean, objectively, the crime rate is much lower today than it was in the 80s. Mm-hmm. I mean, much lower. And much lower than in the 70s. Our crime rate is actually not too bad, violent crime rate, all that kind of stuff. But we live in a world where everything that happens, there's one kid who drowns in a pond halfway around the world. Everybody does that. I know there was at one point on my playground, our playground is we call it a junkyard playground, right? Shipping pallets, spare tires. Every toy out there's broken. One kid came up to me one day to say that a truck didn't have its wheels. And I said, everything here's broken. And we could not find a single toy that wasn't in some way broken. Then he held up a stick to me and said, this isn't broken. And I said, it broke off a tree. So suddenly we started having this. We realized every single thing we were playing with was broken somehow, which that then frees you, right? That frees you. Growing up on a farm, you know how that is. It's if this is broken and it's not a truck anymore, what can it be? Right. And you come up with these kind of ideas. So we have this junkyard playground out there, and we, I don't know. Anyway, the people we leased from had to renew their insurance. And while they were renewing their insurance, they stood on this platform way above, this deck above our playground. And I wasn't there for this, but Pastor Gay, it was in a church. Pastor Gay said to me, she goes, well, she looked down there and she said, we're going to have to she said, there's too many tripping hazards on that playground. And Pastor Gay was on my bandwagon. She said, so I told her I would tell you and ask you if you could do anything about it. And, my first thought is, well, when you're 2 years old, the whole world is a tripping
The
hazard.
whole world, can you keep from tripping?
Is it the only, even, I mean, the worst injury we ever had at my school, this is 20 years. The worst injury we really ever had was a child who fell on a dry, flat linoleum floor, and he wasn't running, and he split his chin open and had to get stitches. I mean, that was literally the worst injury we had. And we let kids take great risks, because for me, you cannot call it play unless there is risk, unless children are free to at least consider risk, at least think about risk. And so anyway, we had this playground out there. So I said so what we did was, I told the parents, it's cooperative school, I said, at the end of every play session, your job is to kick all the toys and junk off the walkways. That's what we did to deal with the tripping hazard. And because but then she handed me this pamphlet. She said, this is the insurance company has this pamphlet about playground safety. And so I took it home, and I said, okay, well, I'm going to figure out where they got this information. And so I went down the rabbit hole of figuring out, where their data was to put this brochure together. And it turns out every single thing in this brochure came out of an incident. I believe it was Chicago in, I think, the 80s, where a boy had fallen off the top of one of those curly slides, and it didn't have high enough railings on it. He'd fallen off and was paralyzed for life. Tragic. I mean, I'm not dismissing that at all. Tragic, horrible. But then these weren't experts on safety who got together. It was the parents and the community got together, which, I support parents, and they come up with their own ideas of what would make the playground safe. That's where we got soft fall zones. That's where we got rounding all the corners. That's where we got all fixed ladders. That's where we got all of these things that go into playground. Get rid of teeter-totters and merry-go-rounds and ropes and all of those kind of things.
Things that we had fun on.
Exactly. Well, exactly. And I get it. I mean, and we have a tendency, and I'm not saying you or me, but we as adults in this culture have a tendency to have catastrophic imaginations, right? Because I can imagine right now, you might have a jet engine falling right for you right now, and you might
an asteroid. It can happen.
It's possible that it's falling on you. But the truth is that we can't live that way, right? Because we make our kids anxious. We make our kids incapable of assessing their own risk. Right. And ultimately, the ultimate safety thing you can do for your child is to put them in charge of their own safety, is to let them have the experience of what does it mean to fall on pavement, right? What does it mean, right? Because many times you say, don't run on the pavement. Until they fall down on it, they're not going to understand it. And then it's okay to warn. It's okay to warn. You will hurt yourself. So when they hurt themselves, to say, maybe you should listen to me better next time. Yeah. I wouldn't even say that. What I do is I say, I will be here to take care of you.
I'll be here to help you
when you get hurt. And then they'll say, I won't be hurt. And then I know they won't, because I've already said to them, I don't say be careful to kids. And if I'm going to say to a kid something, if I see something that might be hazardous, like I see a pokey bit sticking out about at your eye level, but I'm not going to tell them what to do. I'm not going to command them about it. I'm just going to tell them there's some information for you to use.
Yep.
And what I've discovered is nobody really wants to get hurt.
It's so interesting. Isn't that interesting? Yeah.
And if children weren't supposed to learn through their injuries, they wouldn't be designed the way they are.
Right.
Right? Because they're low to the ground, right? So when they fall, they don't have far to fall. And their bones,
there you go. Yes.
Their bones are flexible, right? They're really flexible. It's really hard for them to break their bones. And if they do break their bones, they heal miraculously fast. I had a boy time, and he didn't break it on the playground, but at his home, he broke his femur, right? That's the biggest bone in your body.
Yeah.
He broke his femur. Within 30 days, he was running full speed on the playground.
Yeah.
Now, I'm 59. I'll be 60 in about a week. If I broke
you and I are almost the same exact. No, I'm going to be 59. We're a year apart, but my birthday's the 24th.
All right, little girl. No, just kidding. Just kidding. If I broke my femur, I might not ever walk again, right? So it's when their teeth grow back. There's all of these things they're telling you, their skin, right? When they get wounds on their skin, it heals miraculously fast. You had 6 kids, you know how that is. They sometimes you can see it healing as you're putting the bandage on, right? I mean, you see, I know. I have one here that's been there for like a month. It won't go away. And the reason is that nature or God, or however you want to look at it, has designed children to learn through those injuries so that when they get old and brittle, They have the wisdom to take care of themselves.
Yeah.
And-
yeah. We rob kids of that wisdom. I'll tell you a cringeworthy story for everybody that's going to hear this. Okay. I had two boys that were 4 years apart, my youngest, and then I had a daughter and then another son. And the two boys were 4 years apart, but they were like tight. They were so tight. And they really got into Lord of the Rings and Star Wars. I mean, it was just all about Lord of the Rings and Star Wars. And my older son really, really wanted to learn blacksmithing. And so I did everything I could to figure out how to do that. I even bought a stove. I was going to try to convert it. It just didn't happen. And he got impatient with me. And he went out in an old outbuilding and found some aluminum electrical conduit. And he and his brother went out there and they started pounding that electrical conduit on an anvil with a mallet. And they made their own swords. And they found a grinder out there and they ground them. Not one cut ever.
Yeah.
They made daggers, they made two-edged swords, they made all kinds of weapons out there, and they played Star Wars and they played Lord of the Rings, and not one cut ever, because they knew how sharp those things were.
That's a wonderful story about play.
Yeah, they knew how sharp those things were because they sharpened them on a thing. Yeah. I mean, with a point.
How old were they?
They were like 10, 6 and 10, up to about 14 and 10.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and they played for hours and hours and hours. I was like,
the kids
go grind your swords. You guys get outside in the rain, do it.
Well, I want them to be able to build their own stuff, right? I want them to do this. That's why we have a full woodworking section. We have hammers, nails, saws, drills. We use some power tools. With even 2-year-olds are using these things. Hot glue guns, and people always say, well, don't they hit their thumb with the hammer? And the answer is yeah. Everybody, that's part of the process of learning to use a hammer, is to hit your thumb.
Yeah, the most wonderful toy or pastime that I ever gave my oldest son was a stump and a handful of nails and a hammer. Yeah. That guy went at that for hours.
Mm-hmm.
It was wonderful.
Yeah. Well, and we do. I mean, it's okay. So we do have some responsibility for safety, right? So, we make sure when they're using those tools, we have eye protection, right? Because the eye doesn't grow back, right? So you kind of think about I always think to myself, okay, there's a priority of what we protect, right? Eyes and brains, right? Because those are things that you can cause permanent damage. You're not going to probably cause permanent damage on a kid with the rest of their body, right? Most of what's going to happen there is just going to be scrapes, bruises, bumps, and those are learning alleys, is what we call them.
Yeah, and they just do fine.
And and people sometimes think it makes me sound callous to talk this way. I don't want anybody to get hurt. I really don't. But I know it's inevitable. And I probably stub a toe or hurt myself in some way every single day. Mm-hmm. And I curse the fact I didn't learn that when I was younger.
But you learn to tell about it, right? You survived it.
You survive it. And but it's the most important part though is for me about the risk is that, I mean, they need it, right? Because if you put out, you go and you buy the safest playground structure you can buy, the one that's been approved by every agency, and it's got the ladder, it's got a slide, it's got a pole, whatever they have, bells and whistles, it's got a railing around it and all this stuff. And you put it on a playground somewhere, you're probably going to get 2 good weeks of kids playing really safely on it, right?
Right.
And then some of them are going to say, I played the risk out of this. So they start climbing on the outside. Because they add the risk back in, right? So they make it a little more risky. Or they climb on the top. Or they, same thing with carving a jack-o'-lantern, right? I mean, because I have tools out there, and we'll have 2-year-olds carving their own jack-o'-lanterns at Halloween, and we'll carve these things. Then you put the candle in it, and at first it's like, oh, candle, oh. But if you leave it out there for a while, their fingers start going toward it, right? Because you got to keep adding the risk back to it. So, and so for me, it's all about being there to make sure no permanent damage happens, and to let them know, give them the best of my advice, because what we do know is if you forbid the risk, you say to a child, don't climb on that wall. The moment you turn your back, that's where they're going to be.
They are.
And now they're taking the risk behind your back. And so you're not there to give them advice. You're not there to support or help them. So they make it even more dangerous.
That's true. That's so true.
They learn that it's a negative to have these kind of feelings about wanting to challenge themselves. And I love to connect adults. When I'm talking to adults about this who are nervous, I love starting to ask them about their own childhoods
Mm-hmm.
and get them connected to, tell me about it, like a beautiful, wonderful moment from your own childhood. And invariably, they will talk about being outside. Almost always it's
Mm-hmm.
outside, right? Almost never.
Yeah.
It almost never are there adults involved. It's unsupervised. Almost always it involves other kids, or if it doesn't have other kids, it has animals or some
An
other
animal. Yeah.
animal. And almost always it involves not having a schedule and have some
Mm-hmm.
sweep of time where you had an opportunity to just keep going for as long as you wanted.
Mm-hmm.
There are almost always not toys, or at least manufactured toys. Toys
Right.
like your kids made, that they made
Mm-hmm.
themselves. That a lot of times that is the story. But
Yeah.
that you find out, and you find out they're out there doing these things on their own. And these are the most beautiful moments. And I assert that these moments that they're recalling, these are the times when they were actually learning the most.
Yes.
And then I like to say to them after they get, they have the warm, nostalgic, amberized glow of their memory. And I say, and that's what I want for your kids.
Mm-hmm. Like all the time.
Yeah.
Not just one memory,
Right.
right? This is what childhood is. This is really actually what makes life worth living.
Yeah.
Honestly, for you, I mean, as people, we just get away from it too much. Okay, then the other thing I'd like to know then is, what does your syllabus look like? I know you can't tell parents to do this and do this and do this. I mean,
my syllabus is awesome. It is me on my commute to work, thinking about what the kids did yesterday and deciding, okay, well, what kind of environment do they need today? What kind of environment do I think they need today? With totally knowing that my agenda gets thrown out the second the kids show me they have a better agenda. The curriculum arrives when the children arrive.
Mm.
Everything.
So you actually go into each day with zero plan.
Yeah, other than what I've decided, what I think, okay, so they were really playing with these blocks a lot today, so we're going to keep those out. But you know what? I think they kept talking about babies. So I'm going to make sure the babies are over there too, just in case they want to use the babies. Or, yesterday they were all trying to build birdhouses at the workbench. So, maybe I'll put a regular birdhouse over there just to show them, what a birdhouse looks like. 9 times out of 10, they'll dismantle that birdhouse. 9 times out of 10, the babies end up being like, let's eat the babies. They'll find some other way to play with those babies rather than in a nurturing way, because, they like to be naughty sometimes.
Yes.
And so I always say, to me, my job really, so Reggio Emilia model of early childhood, I don't know if you're familiar with that, but this is a play-based model. It's Reggio Emilia. It's an Italian model. They talk about every child has 3 teachers. Their first teacher are the adults. The second teacher are the other kids. And the third teacher is their environment. So when you talk about being out in the countryside, or you talk about, outbuildings and things like that, you're talking about environment. Mm-hmm. And in many ways, that third teacher is actually the biggest teacher that a kid has. And so what I think about is my job is to get there and work with her. And I think of her as a female, my third teacher, and work with my third teacher to get her ready for the kids. Some of that involves deciding, so are there going to be boundaries today? And what should they be? And why do I have those boundaries? So there's a permanent fence around the playground so they don't go running in the street. That's a fair boundary, I think, is that there's our limitation right there. Some of the things are like, I think I'm more like guide rails. So I decide, okay, so these are the things we're going to have available today. The kids can always ask for other stuff, right? Because they know what we have. They can come to me and say, Teacher Tom, I need tape. And so I'll go get the tape for them, although tape's always there. But that was a bad example. But they might say, I want some of that red clay, mm-hmm. right? And I think we can use that. So they know it's there, so I'll get that out. But most of the time, that's my job, is to get the third teacher ready, to make sure one part of it is to check for hazards, right? Because I go around urban playground, right? It's going to be broken glass. I kind of want, broken glass, there's no real value to broken glass. So I do try to kind of keep that off the playground. A rusty nail sticking out of something at eye level, there's no real value to keep a rusty nail though, so I get rid of that. Because, there's hazards, and that's how I can distinguish those from risk. Hazards are things where somebody might accidentally hurt themselves, where anybody could hurt themselves on it. A risk is something you choose to do. Right. Like, I'm going to ride this Tonka truck down the hill. Right? That's a risk, right? And the other thing that I always like to point out to people is that people who doubt the educational value of this kind of of play is that if you watch a kid and you observe what they're doing. And I really do. That's the other piece of my, syllabus or curriculum is I spend a lot of time studying the kids. I'm a researcher. And that's what I think our proper role really is to understand their thinking and to understand where they are going and to be prepared for what might be the next step without dictating that next step. Right. So, you were thinking about that with the blacksmith stuff. Right. He was talking about blacksmith. So you were thinking about where might he go with it now? He went and took it a different way. He went and found his own way to do it.
Yeah. I knew he wanted to make swords. It was just too hard for me to set up.
Yeah. Well, you're an adult, right? You were thinking blacksmith. Yeah. Okay. Well, we need fire and we need an anvil and we need, those big tongs, having those gloves that go up to your elbows and we need all those things. He's like, no, I just want to pound some metal.
Yeah.
And I can do it without that. I don't need all that stuff. So
he figured it out. Yeah.
So that was an example of you setting your agenda aside, because I say, we're humans, right? We always come in with an agenda. I mean, we can't help it. We have some kind of agenda. But what I say to myself is I remind myself before the kids arrive, I've got this agenda. I'm aware of my agenda. The second the children show me they've got a different idea, which makes it a better agenda, that's where we go.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So you just set the table, and I talk about this in my writings too. It's just you set the table, and I try to convince parents, if you make Thanksgiving, they will eat. Yeah. If you cook Thanksgiving, they will eat. They may not eat everything you have out there, but they will eat a lot. And then tomorrow you do it again, and the next day you do it again. Your job is as a mentor. Right. That's my reference to it is just mentoring is you just say, you tell me what you think your educational goals are. I mean, I'm talking about older kids, right?
Kids, for sure. Yeah.
Older kids, not little. They have no.
When I tell a kid, if I ask a 5-year-old what their educational goal is, they're going to say, I'm going to show you right now. And they take off running. That's their goal, is to run really fast.
Yeah. Get away from you. Yeah, I'm actually working right now with my my 5-year-old granddaughter who's very ADHD, and that's something that comes up for me too. Is what do you do for special needs kids? And my daughter, interestingly, and I'll tell you, my oldest daughter didn't read till she was 12, and you mentioned this in your blog today, which I loved, by the way. Great blog today, very assertive. And going after the reality of what education is. So it was fun. I've been sharing that all over and saying, see, I'm not alone in this, Right. She didn't learn till she was 12, and we had tried to teach her, because I had her in public school until 4th grade. When she was and I took all my kids out when my oldest was going into 8th grade, because they were doing critical race theory stuff then. They were making them write apology letters it was bad. And I couldn't convince them not to do this curriculum. So I took them out. I took all the kids out. They were all struggling, all 3 of them that were in school. And so we had tried, I'd been working with her on the phonics and everything, because they're like, she's got a learning disability. She's fine. And I'm like, she doesn't have a learning disability. I just know she doesn't. She didn't. She just simply had other things she needed to learn first. And so we took her out, and when she was 12, one day and I stopped with the reading stuff. I just said, she's perfectly intelligent. There's nothing wrong here. And she played most of the time. She pursued the things she wanted to do. And she was 12, and she has a daughter with the same thing. 12, picked up a book that looked interesting and just started reading one day. At 15, went up to the community college.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's what the natural window. When people like you have allowed their reading to emerge, the natural window for learning to read is somewhere between 5 and 12 years old. That's just the natural window. And that people who've had the courage like you did to, it takes courage in our society to let your 8-year-old not be, remedial, hammer them with reading. What they find is that kids who start reading later go do exactly what your child did, your daughter did, daughter, right? Yeah. That's exactly what they do. They go straight from not reading to reading Harry Potter.
Yeah,
right? Maybe
it was weird.
Yeah, well, it's not weird. It's because literacy is built into us. We think that it's some kind of magical thing that we have to teach kids. you know, humans have been literate since what, the second century BC or something like that. I
Right.
mean, our brains are pretty adapted to, you know, we're there. And, you know, if you really go back and you look at hieroglyphics and everything, we've been painting cave paintings since there were Homo
Right.
sapiens. So literacy isn't that alien of an idea. And I say this a lot. I said, if we decided that we needed to start teaching walking in school, it would take less than a generation before we believed
People couldn't walk.
we needed schools to teach walking.
Yeah.
Because there's so many things that we think we need to teach. I mean, yeah, there are some kids, you know, if you're dyslexic or there's some other learning type thing where it makes reading more challenging, and it's good to identify those things. It's good to identify those things early and support them, because being illiterate in our society is not an okay thing. I mean, you need to read. Most kids, though, if you don't push it on them, they're going to come to a point in their life where they're going to say, oh, everybody else is reading Harry Potter, I want to read that. They're going to say, you know what, I'm playing this video game and there's words on the screen and I want to know what they say.
Yeah.
You know, they come across the things where they really need to do that. Now, Chauncy, I am going to go back on one thing you said, just because I wanted to, you know, when you mentioned critical race theory and all that, I think we might disagree on that category. I do believe that teaching racial history in America is very important, but let's just leave it at that. This isn't
okay.
I just want people listening to know that friends can disagree.
Well, I don't have a problem teaching racial history. I taught plenty of that to my kids too.
Good.
I just don't want there to be guilt put on people.
Fair enough.
They didn't.
Let's just leave it at that. I don't want to get into that discussion.
Yeah.
I will happily discuss that with you some other time, but we're talking about play right now.
Right. Okay. All right. Well, so you don't have any specific. So 6 weeks. What do we get for 6 weeks?
Okay. So 6 weeks. That's about probably a little over. It's about 3.5 hours of recorded video. So every week for 6 weeks, every Monday, you're going to get your lessons, for want of a better word, for that week, the video selections for that week, and reflection guides. So sort of an opportunity for you to sit down, if you're somebody who likes to write, sounds like you are, to kind of write your reflections, your ideas, your thoughts. If you're not a writer, you don't have to do it. It's just that it's there as an opportunity to sort of prompt your thinking. And then at the end of that, you'll get a certificate. So for educators, some of them want to make sure they get their continuing education type of thing, and the certificate can be used to get those hours taken care of. And then we have a community forum. And so we're the cohort. So the people who want to take part in that can spend time discussing online their thoughts and their ideas, to ask questions, get their questions answered. And then we have, a big live, sort of big, massive Q&A kind of closing sort of ceremony, where it's a live event, sort of like the one that got your attention when I did that webinar.
Right.
This is just for the participants in the thing. So it's usually via Zoom is how we'll do it. And really what you're going to learn is what you're going to hear is how I think about play-based education. But I tried very hard. I've tried very hard not to tell anybody what to do. Yeah. What I want to do is, I guess for me, one of the key parts of play-based education or self-directed learning is this concept of loose parts. Are you familiar with that?
I'm not. No, explain that to me.
Well, there was a landscape architect of all things back in the 70s by the name of Simon Nicholson. And he wrote an article for Landscape Architecture magazine, which doesn't exist anymore. And you can't even find a digital version of this article anymore. You have to get like a photocopy of it. There's photocopies online, so you can get that. And his concept was, he said, what I'm noticing as an architect is that the architects have all the fun. We have all the fun figuring these spaces out, and then we design a museum, or we design a school, or we design something else. And then the people come there and we've already taken all the fun out of it. We've done the fun part. So his idea was what we need. And the title of the article, by the way, was How Not to Treat Children. And so what he did was he proposed this concept that the best learning takes place in environments where there are lots and lots of loose parts. So things to manipulate on your own, to move on your own, and a lot of people interpret this to mean, pine cones. A pine cone's a loose part, right? Anything that doesn't have a script built into it. And so he's distinguishing these loose parts from scripted toys, right? When you buy a truck at the store, There's a script built into a truck. The dump truck, it dumps. It doesn't dump. It drives. It goes fast. It goes slow. But there's a certain number of things. A Spider-Man toy or something like that. They have a script built into them. Whereas
Right.
these are the kind of toys, the hunter-gatherer era, right? These are the kind of toys that you played with, the toys you make yourself. And so for me, this is a really core piece of what we're talking about. So that's why I said we have the shipping pallets and the tires. Kids make their own vehicles out of these things. They make their own forts. They're always creating their own, and then the things move on and become something else, so that it never gets boring. It never gets tiresome. And so this idea of loose parts, to me, it plays out in a lot of ways. And also in terms of the way I think of my role. I am also a loose part in their environment. I am. That's why I really don't want to. I want to provide them information. You know, I might say the sky is blue or the grass is green, but I'm not going to say, come here, sit down.
Yeah.
Get in the car now. I'm not going to boss them around. I'm going to, because I believe that they should have the same rights and responsibility and rights, and be treated with as much respect as I would you, or I'd any other adult, any adult person, because that's the idea of actual people. Treating people.
Right. I mean, I used to spend hours on the sandy bank of the little creek, one of the little creeks by my house as a kid, and just building little villages out of twigs and leaves, you know, just so much fun. I loved doing that, and making boats, seeing what kinds of designs floated fastest down the creek.
Remember the Pooh sticks? Winnie the Pooh? Drop the stick on one side of the bridge, it comes out. That's a classic loose parts play thing. To this day, kids love playing that game. When you show up at a bridge, they all drop something off the side and then run to the other side to see where it comes out.
Oh no, super fun.
Because they've got questions, right? They have they're asking and answering their own questions, and there's no better way to make it relevant than to have it be your own questions.
That's right. And on that note, I think we can wrap up, because that's the whole enchilada right there.
Okay. Well, thank you, Chauncy. This has been a lot of fun.
Yes, it has been. I just have loved meeting you, and I hope we can do it again sometime.
Me too, Chauncy. Thank you so much.
Okay. All right. Talk to you later.
Bye-bye.
Bye.